Hi guys, I wanted to talk to you today about food chains. Okay, so I'm going to share this PowerPoint with you today that's going to talk about food chains. All right, so what is a food chain? A food chain is a way of thinking about how plants and animals in an ecosystem are connected to each other. How do they interact with each other? Food chains trace the flow of energy through an ecosystem. How is that energy made? Where is it coming from? All energy comes from the sun. In almost every food chain on Earth, the energy will come from the sun. In a food chain, you have producers. Producers are green plants that produce their own food using sunlight. Producers cannot eat, therefore, they have to make their own food. Consumers do not make their own food, they depend on other organisms to live. Primary consumers. Some animals are primary consumers. They eat plants or parts of plants to survive. Okay, these are the ones that eat plants. A butterfly drinks nectar from flowers. Primary consumers. Some animals are primary consumers. They eat plants to survive. A sheep eats grass. Can you think of other primary consumers? Cows, giraffes. Primary consumers consume what they eat through plants, and they are called herbivores. They only eat plants. Secondary consumers. Secondary consumers eat other animals. So you have your primary consumers that eat the plants. Then you have your secondary consumers that eat the animals that ate the plant. They are predators. Predators. Predators are animals that eat other animals. The other animals are their prey. So your predators do the hunting, and your prey is what is eaten. What predators and prey do you know? Okay, you have frogs that eat grasshoppers. Grasshoppers eat plants. You have fish that eat worms. Tertiary consumers are predators that eat other predators. Animals that only eat meat are called carnivores. This is a pond food chain. You have the sun, duckweed, which is a plant that grows in the pond. You have the mayfly nymph, which eats the duckweed. Then you have a frog that eats the mayfly. And then you have an owl that eats the frog. So you have your sun, your duckweed, your mayfly, your frog, and then your owl. Which is the producer? The producer here is the duckweed. The duckweed uses the sun to create its own food. Which of these is the consumers? Your mayfly, your frog, and your owl are all three consumers. Your mayfly would be your primary consumer, and your frog and your owl would be your secondary consumers. Think about it. A frog eats insects. Is it a producer or a consumer? It's a consumer because it eats. If it eats something, it is consuming something. A frog is a consumer. It does not make its own food. Think about it. Lily pads make their own food. Are they producers or consumers? Lily pads are producers because they make their own food. Which would you expect to find more in an ecosystem? Producers or consumers? Would you find more things that make their own food or more things that consume their own food? Hmm. You would find producers or green plants. All ecosystems must have more producers than consumers. Your trees, your flowers, your plants, your lily pads, all of those things that create their own food, there are more of those than there are consumers. You are part of the food chain also. Can you think of how you are part of the food chain? Look at this picture of tomatoes. How would you fit into the food chain that involved the tomato? The sun helps the tomato to create its own source of food as it's growing in the garden. You go to the garden and you pick it, and then you eat the tomato. So the sun, the tomato produces, and you become the consumer. Are people producers or consumers? We are consumers. What have you learned? What have you learned about food chains? We've learned that the sun creates energy into the plant as it creates its own food or produces its own food. And then predators eat prey, and predators are consumers. This is an activity that you need to complete off of what we've learned today. It says complete this food chain activity on your paper and submit it to your teacher. Okay, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take the first order consumer, the sun, the producer, your second order consumer, or your decomposer, and you're going to put it into the boxes below. Decomposers are things that live off of decaying products such as mushrooms. Okay, then the second step is to complete the sequence chain by putting the following organisms into the correct part of the chain. Where would the insect go? Where would the fox go? Where would the grass go? Where would the birds? Where would the bacteria? What eats what and what produces its own food? So you'll need to complete this and then submit it back to your teacher. Okay, you probably won't be able to print it, so you'll probably just have to draw this onto paper and then take a picture of it and upload it back to your teacher. Okay, well, that's what we talked about today and what we've learned about consumers and producers, and I hope that you enjoyed this program. And we will continue to learn more about our food chains and how we produce and consume food in our next session.